Do you think people wonder where we come from as humans?
Yeah.
Like, no, I wouldn't say come from. So if you can imagine this back in the time, that you notice that forests start to decay after a while,
Yes, they do.
and some people say, if we just leave it, it will help itself. I don't think it will. I think we're that sort of missing link. Just as the turn of the ice age, let's say, and it started to, melt, thaw out, and we began to venture out into this new wilderness. I think that since then we'd been doing such a behavior for such a long time that it might have left the trees to adapt to that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we have stopped doing this particular behavior, nature needs time to adapt to this new way. Now, whether it will or won't, well, especially the forests, is another question entirely. So, and we've got these behaviors that seem a bit strange, like collecting.
Mm-hmm.
We like to collect stuff, yeah? So, when talking to a few people online, they say, I just love my belongings. I think that's true for everybody. If you take a look around, that's why we've got houses, and we like to keep our belongings, the stuff we've collected inside the houses.
Yes, we do.
And I think that comes from, where these behaviors come from. I mean, because that's every human. Near enough, except for some tribes, but even still, they collect things. If you notice that they collect a certain amount, they might collect some tinder.
Yeah.
In order to make fire. They might pick up a few valuable rocks that create spark.
Mm-hmm.
They'll hold on to that. A piece of metal they'll hold on to. Something sacred that was carved. They might hold on to that.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing they collect is more archived knowledge of the land and the way it lays out. And moving, traveling from one place to another to find food. So, but still there's that collection. But I think it really amplified, and some tribes amplified more than others in this collection process. But I think it had a purpose. So we weren't cutting down trees. There's no way in the beginning we were ever cutting down large trees.
Mm-hmm.
And we probably weren't tunneling into them. And the reason for that would be there would be no point. Why? Because it's easier to collect the branches. I'm pretty sure that we would have been quite associated with fire. If you come from a time when it was Ice Age, you would have known how to make fire. I'm sure that would have already have happened before the Ice Age. So then that gives you a bit of an idea based on behavior alone. A little bit longer time period before an Ice Age. So we were around before something changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they had learned to make fire back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think with a lot of time, you'll find a way through that. And probably traveling in different ways to find different food. It would have been about, but just not abundantly. So it's easier for us to go in and collect branches. And by doing so, we had this behavior that impacts the land.
Yeah.
All behaviors impact things. So whether it's a bug or a set of bugs that go for a certain plant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you've got 5 or 6 bugs that have tapped into it and the sugary smell is everywhere, it's telling all other bugs there's a feast happening here. So if you've got a field worth of stinger nettles and one has all been picked out and it's releasing a scent, all the other insects are going to go to this one because it's already happening there. These ones, it's in the nettle and they'd have to dig at it, but they go for this one in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Hence why you notice that in the garden that they're more for one plant compared to another.
Yeah.
And that's because these ones are all chomping away at it and it's releasing a scent, which is then telling the other bugs, straws up, because all the sweet sugar that they're going for is what they're doing. And that behavior impacts the plant. Compared to the others, it's less. The berries are much more smaller. So behavior affects environment, pretty much. And environment affects behavior. See, humans are reverse to that. I think that when we look at different things, they'll say environment affects affects your behavior.
Yeah.
But also our behavior affects the environment. So I don't think it's all one way. I think it's two ways. Psychology, sociology.
Yeah.
We're somewhere in the middle of all of that.
Yeah.
And by going into the forest, we'd have collected more and more firewood and brought it and moved it. And as a way, we'd have cleared the forest out. Also, that behavior of wandering to collect, I think we would have crushed down an awful lot of vegetation, which would have impacted the environment.
Yeah.
I don't know, back in the day, humans were a bit more respectful. They had this whole respect the animal so the spirit could go on. So they wouldn't have taken the tree down when they can have the branches. And some of the forests that I've seen in memory are some that are walked through
Yeah.
and some that haven't been walked through. And the ones that haven't been walked through, the trees are all scraggly and rotten,
Yeah.
and there's an awful lot of vegetation just spilling out everywhere. There's almost like the ivy effect where it's holding onto other trees and pulling all of this down.
Yeah.
Everything seems to be decay. There's an awful lot of fungus attack on
Yeah.
all of the trees, and the ones that are walked through by humans. And you would think just by us walking through, well, what happens when you walk your dog? Do you pick up a stick? It's not recommended, by the way, but
Yeah.
do you pick up a stick
Yeah.
and throw it?
And throw it. Yeah.
And we tread on sticks and they break.
Yeah.
Therefore, after time, this gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And this shows you a forest that seems to be a lot more healthier. I don't know if you see it in that place, especially in Thetford, where the people walk and cut through that bit. We all
Yeah.
went walking there.
Yeah.
Do you notice how healthy the trees are in that vicinity? But the area where no one goes, and you can tell because of how difficult it is to navigate through, have you noticed how rotten it is?
Yeah.
And then you take the one over near Eccles, again, decay. It's all falling down, it's all
Yeah.
rotten.
Yeah. Okay.
So much as lean on a tree, and then the variety of fungus is a lot. So, again, a behaviour to do and a behaviour not to might be impacting trees. And is that where, when we let go of one cycle and pick up another one, we are also in that chain where we mess up the whole entire Mayan calendar, if you like?
Yeah.
And another thing that tells us that we were collecting firewood is if you look at that fence there,
Yeah.
what do you think they would have done in bigger families, let's say? I'm talking about we get more established, but I think after an ice age, and it's all thawing out and everything is, the landscape is changing, you're not going to be in battle mode because your senses are going to be overwhelmed with this abundance starting to appear everywhere. Flowers. Yeah. So, and I think a lot of trees would have been damaged during that, except for the few hardy ones would have made it above the ice. I'm sure they would have grown taller. I reckon. But I don't think we're going to have been in the mindset of battle and all of that sort of stuff. I think it'd have been cautious, but I think it'd have been too much. Because everything that has survived or gone underground or did this or whatever would start venturing out. Then they would have been spoilt for a lot of things, so you wouldn't have had the need to, fight over anything. And when collecting all of this type of wood, which I reckon some of the bigger families would have done, they would have known work, fire, this, that and the other. And it's pretty obvious that when you see one person do it, it's going to spread like wildfire anyway. Another person will know how to do it, and perhaps there will be more teaching beings. If there was a big wood pile that you collected, you was going to go through, do you think someone would have tried weaving it?
Yeah.
Would have sort of done something with it? experimented with it. And perhaps, I think that in the beginning they made javelins, not bow and arrow, nothing with a piece of flint on the end of it. Not before that got established. I think that it would have just been a sharp stick. And perhaps there would have been some feathers put on there. Some people would, some people wouldn't, I reckon. And yeah, I reckon they'd have shaved the edges down. And javelled. I think that would have been a bit more wiser to... And then as food supplies begin to dwindle, because again, when you're coming out of that, your family is exploding, someone else's family is exploding, because there's such an abundance. The environment is very giving in that. So it meant that you were full belly. You got to think about it. Our ancestors weren't going to be running around terribly much. Most people have got a lot of energy, what we say now. I think that there would have been times where they would have had moments of not being able to do much based on not having the energy to do it. Nowadays, 3 meals a day, you have more than enough energy to want to go and do something. I think back then, hit and miss. Winter, perhaps not, been a bit more lethargic, less food. And then in the summer, a bit more. But again, with the numbers of humans growing and expanding in that, there would have been a limit because of food. That's probably what triggered the battles off. One family, another family, another family, another family decided to, rather than capture the animals, kill them from a distance, learn to catch them to keep them. Hence the sticks. Collecting more sticks from the forest, again, which kept fungus down, which kept the trees healthy. They would have been a bit more respectful the way they were with the animals, the spirit and this, that and the other. But they would only took what they need.
Wild chickens, domesticated and...
Yeah, but weaving it like this, you can keep some animals in that. They'll feel safe behind it. You can weave this around. Again, collecting the wood. And when your numbers went low on your animals, or you've eaten them, you can burn the firewood. So the wood around them would have been what cooked them. I'm sure of it. Not all, but I think most would have learned to do this with fire. Yeah. And I think fire would have been a bit more... And I think with that, it kept the climate very stable. Now we're finding ferocious winds, but you got to understand, trees block a lot of wind.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. They sort of order it. They organise the airflow. I mean, it's in their best interest to do so. I think it works in many ways for them. So, Mars would be less breezy if it had, well, if you think about it, if it had trees on it, the dust wouldn't be so dusty. Moisture would be pulled out because the roots would dig right down deep to find any, if there's hydrocarbon there. I'm not sure I believe everything I read, because, you know, in certain tactics you can say a lot of negative things about a planet because you might want it. Do you understand? If I went there and discovered something, some place around Jupiter, and it was rich in oxygen, it was rich in past animal remnants, vegetation remnants, then I'm going to understand that there's going to be types of fuel there. I know there's going to be geological processes that might be valued to go into mobile phones. I'm going to tell you the complete opposite to that. So I've got to be very careful when assumptions of what you're taught, because you can always be taught gospel, but you can also be taught, well, lies basically, in order to, you know, safeguard that, because you wouldn't want anybody else to get there. You know, in a world that's quite divided, you could say your enemies.
Exactly.
Yeah, do you get what I mean? And then that keeps you looking here for stuff.
You don't want to give them some...
Whilst you ready your arsenal, because perhaps you don't know how to get there to mine it back then when you discovered it. So you're going to tell everyone the opposite. Not saying that it is. Let's hope that the world isn't like that, but it's more likely that it could be more that way. You know, at the end of the day, the science you got back from Venus is science from Russians.
Yeah.
So, and then you've got some from America and some from Europe. You know, that's why it's very important, I think, that we all have our space programs. Because then we know. With perhaps a more of a certainty than relying on somebody else to tell us, depending on where you sit on that scale. And then if they have fallen out with somebody else, it might be in their best interests not to say the full story. But one thing is for sure, most of the planets are quite breezy. Especially when we look at Venus getting closer, it's very breezy. And you can contribute that to it having large amounts of CO2 and the greenhouse gas effect. It's possible. Or the lack of trees.
Yeah.
The lack of trees. Here on Earth, we've had more trees. Therefore, a more stable climate, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And with them constantly drawing the moisture up and sweating it into the environment as well, that's going to keep a lot of water on the surface from deep down. Now factor that into somewhere like Mars. You know, they're going to go quite far down. The roots draw up that moisture, sweat it off, and then you might start getting droplets. Let's say we'll say form as rain, but there won't be any breeze there after that. I think there will be, but just not what we experience here. So, yeah, I'm a great believer that if there was a way to put trees on Venus, the first thing that it would start to knock out is those two vortexes. They're at the bottom. One spins one way, one spins the other way. Two tornadoes, I believe, that just continuously spin. I think it would knock that. You would see that decay. So, more trees. And I think you get a bit more of a stable environment.
Yeah. There were more trees here as well, weren't there?
Yeah, I
In the
definitely believe
past,
that you know, that we were, perhaps no documentation has ever been made about severe weather because there was so much vegetation. It was nearer impossible for us to cut these types of tree down. It was too challenging, and probably you wouldn't think to do it because it's easier to collect this. Isn't it easier to go and grab the stuff that's already fallen in a time where energy is precious? You'll be saving energy, and your energy will be more utilized at hunting. But I think more using the mind to hunt as opposed to, you know, running around all the time. I think it would have been a bit more clever hunting. And if you observe cats, when it comes to bigger game, rabbits and stuff, they hunt clever. They hunt smart. They're not chasing.
Not
Lions
running around.
will-
Waiting.
But I think if a lion really wants to hunt, I think they also want to hunt smart, but it doesn't always go that way. So seems like it more simple because the cat's on its own. One of them, house domesticated cat's on its own. And the ones in other places are a bit more pack mentality. So, but they hunt smart. They wait in an area, and it hops out and just like that. So, and I think we would have formulated that, I think. But I think we would have been more javels. And javel fishing. Or spear fishing. But no antlers, no bits of flint on the end. Sharp point, I think. Feathers, perhaps. Leaves works just as well. To be honest, I think it was more common to have leaves. And that mimics certain things around, whereas you see them, they look like darts. I'm sure certain things like that would have grown, and they'd have thrown it. I saw it was very effective. They might have even put those on the end as well for flight. So, I think this is how the behaviour sort of forms, develops. It changes. I think that's if you want to change it. At the end of the day, I think that's a want. You've got to want it. Either you do or you don't. If you don't want to, then I think No, you might stay stuck. But yeah, and behavior is like environment affects behavior, and behavior affects environment. Effects, affects. Not really sure. Okay.
yeah.
So, and I think that we have changed the land multiple times. The cycles. So, is that why it's more healthier forestry that you see are the ones that people walk through, the trails? And when you move away from the trails, I don't know, I think you start to see it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a lot going on in there.
Yeah, yeah. In my country, people go and collect mushrooms. So in those forests, it's nice forests with either needles down there or some moss or something. But it's possible to walk through in between bigger, smaller trees. But places where people do not go are like, I don't know how to describe it. Everything on the floor, and if you get there somehow, then you are like, do I want to really try to go through there?
Yeah, I think the more of us in the woods, and I think that we were collecting a lot more branches, not just for fire, but I think for perhaps making types of shack. A baseline house.
Yeah.
I think it would have been from the wood. I think we were collecting wood for that reason. Boundaries, things to sit on. It's basically a nest, but a bit more suited for humans, I think. Early humans. Yeah, I think that's where we would have been more in that. And I think then that affected the environment, and yeah, I think that's what allowed for some of the trees to really, because there was a high level of respect, especially when we look at pagan.
Yeah.
No, was it pagan? No,
Yeah.
It might have been Celts. Yeah, which were pagan, aren't they?
Yeah, we call them pagans these days, and maybe some people before them as well.
So, carving into trees and stuff.
Yeah.
The respect for it. Why cut the tree when I can take the branch?
Yeah.
Why would I want to cut the tree with lacking of energy when it's easier to just the branch?
Yeah. Or the dry ones that fall now and then you just grab it. It's already not that heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you think about stone tools, one, you've got to have a lot of endurance to wield one of those. And to take down a tree, it takes a lot of time. Now it's like...
Yeah.
It still takes quite a bit of time, even with a good chainsaw. You can say that it gives it a run for its money, but it's a lot quicker if you had to smack that with a flint piece or a stone tool.
Yeah.
Metal would have helped, but again, it's still been quite endurance. You need it to be able to keep going with that. So perhaps they took down trees, but it would have been over a longer period of time, I think. It would have been easier to go for the branches, put your weight on it and crunch.
Yeah.
And then the tree's still there, and it might give you something next time. So, and then we would have been pruning, which would have altered the trees.
Yeah.
And then would we have done that pruning at certain times of the year? More so vigorously than any other time throughout the year.
Yeah.
And again, this is beneficial to most trees.
Yeah, and people
Actually,
learn
all
that
plants.
and do it with fruit, don't they?
Yeah.
They have fruit tree and...
Yeah, a fruit tree is a bit more accidental.
Yeah, it
The
is.
tree is almost like saying, look, I've got a really nice food source hanging from this tree. You just got to reach up and get me. And as you go to reach up to get it, you might accidentally break a branch trying to do that. That's by design. You've just pruned it.
But people would put there another one, something else, and then they would have pears and apples on one tree. But it comes from what you are saying, doesn't it? From the first taking of the branches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I wonder if they'd have then snapped something off and tried staking it in somewhere. Yeah, it didn't work. A few seasons later. Because the knowledge isn't there, you see. They wouldn't have known that things would take time. And even if they had have pulled something out to see if it would grow by staking it in the ground, such as a cutting or a clone, they would have left, believing that that doesn't work. And even if they did go back and see that that was growing, they wouldn't associate it with, that was the last one. It would just look like that's a new one. You see, because they didn't have that sort of captured knowledge there that had to have been around longer, settled, in order to see that catch. And then, learn something new. Learn something new. I think that comes bit by bit. But yeah, anytime you're reaching up to get anything from a tree, you always bring a few branches down with you. I mean, if you look at that one, it could do with a prune. See, this one here is dead. Yeah, but if you would have gone up there to collect something, that branch will break due to it being weaker. There's one on the end as well, but you've got life with the one on the end that's dead, if you see that. The one on the end there, slightly more. Which is this one. You see it?
Yeah, I see.
You prune that out. But just by reaching up, you bring down a lot of the dead branches off the tree, which frees it up. It'll get on a saddle there, so the chances of it doing it next year is pretty high. And then our behaviour. You know, if it was squirrels, they knock down all of the those types of dry branches. Yeah, because they can land on it and then jump off of it, and as they jump off it, it'll snap. Or they'll jump on it and it snaps with them on it, and then they're very quick at reflexes to then go again. So it's like a double jump. Jump once, and then the brain is very quick to know something's going down, and they got a high reflex, and then they jump to the next one without actually falling. But they bring the twigs down. And wherever you've seen squirrels, so there's that plum tree in over in Eccles. Which, when I was there as a lad, it wasn't nothing special, but there weren't that many squirrels, and then all of a sudden, there's quite a few squirrels, and that plum tree is, they seem to orbit this tree because of the plums. I think I saw something like, no word of a lie, I lost count at around 53, and I wasn't doing it again. That's how many squirrels were there. Man, it was so many. I've never seen so many squirrels in my life. Everywhere you looked. And in their numbers, they got their behaviour of confidence. Not much, but enough that they didn't mind. You were closer to them than I've ever been to a squirrel, if you get what I mean. They seemed to... cautious of you, yeah, but not as cautious as they would be if they were on their own, which is odd, but group mentality, I think, is automatic confidence, I think. It's still a bit weary, but their guard is much more down, or it's because their eyes is on the prize. Because, you know, by me watching all of this palaver, they led me to the plum tree. I didn't even know it was it. I can see why. They taste really good, because I was reaching up and grabbing a few. It was like a wave of squirrels moving. It's interesting. It wasn't really a tree, it was more... it was really healthy. So, yeah, there's that behaviour there. And then if humans add into that behaviour as well, it's sort of where you fit nature. And then that behaviour affects nature to then produce more of the food source that you tap into. In a way, it has a limit. You know, if you're just relying on that and natural expansion, nature has a way to limit your family's growth or expansion, because there's not enough to go around. So do the animals. Then there's not enough to feed you to expand your family. Now we just go to a supermarket, so there's more than enough to expand your family. If you understand what I mean there. So
I do.
and like we say, the earth's big, but it has a limit. Nature, unattended, and you don't do anything about it, it's just like farming, let's say, and you don't expand this, it has a limit. It can prevent you from expanding further. So if your food supply is low, your population will be low. And then when you know, you're limited to food. Yeah. You can expand beyond your food ratio, but you'll find that numbers will drop off quicker, and it will sustain but the others will begin to drop off. So there you'll reach your limit.
Yeah.
So you have to expand your food. And by doing so, it expands the oxygen and the carbon ratio, balances that out. If you don't do anything about it, and you rely on it,
Not good.
no. No, it's not. Of course it's not. You haven't got enough food, you haven't got enough air, you haven't got enough this. Then moisture. You see, this runs away. Everything runs away. It's like a river. With this extra plant matter, let's say, it's digging down deeper, bringing the moisture up, which in process you can drink this. More water. And then that has a limit. And then if you're not sourcing water, you reach your buffer zone again. Everything's limited. Everything is limited if you don't become aware of it. And then you look at it and you think, right, okay, so real estate being the planet, if you don't expand, you're limited. If you don't expand your food, you're limited. Food is wonderful if it's natural because it takes care of many other factors.
Yeah.
It also replenishes cleans your air. So you expand that. The food, just expanding your food usually should be enough to expand your oxygen switchy ratio, let's say, carbon oxygen ratio, among other things. Also animal. But again, you've got to expand their food naturally. Just by doing a few things such as making artificial food for animals, you impact your oxygen supply. Think about it, if you can make it artificially, or if you can do it naturally and expand loads, you need more plants, right? As you're doing this, and you collect that, which one will have more oxygen? Or cleaner, let's say, from carbon to oxygen?
With plants.
The ones with plants. So natural is the way to go. Artificial? Because you're making that, but it's not really giving you anything. It's just giving you that product that you've just artificially made. It hasn't. Has it gave you any oxygen? Has it cleaned your carbon ratio to oxygen? No.
No, when you make rubbish and whatever else.
And then that's you need something that's gonna. You've got to be thrifty. You've got to think really much 5 steps. And if one thing takes care of 4 things for you that you don't really need to, I mean, it goes a long way. And then does that balance your... I wouldn't say 100% it's going to balance the environment 100% or weather. I think that, it's better than not. It's better than not. I think it's going to calm it down. And small flips here, there. I think it goes a long way. And then we rely on trees to hold on to the carbon, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
But yeah, this expansion ratio gets you space ready. You can do everything artificially and chemically, but it doesn't get you anywhere. Because now the workload is even bigger.
Yeah, because you have to get rid of whatever you created and you don't know how because you never thought about that at the first place.
And then you're limited.
Yeah.
So you need extra space, you need farming, wonderful, but expanding. Keeping it natural is wonderful. More so than fleshy and meaty. Because it expands. It purifies water. Yeah, there's several ways to do it. Evaporation and plants drinking and... Yeah, this purifies water. Did you know that?
Yeah.
You see, so you get an awful lot from this that it already comes... It does more than what you could ever get with technology. Just by planting something and then it's absorbing the water, sweating that off. That's purification process. I remember when I was a kid and was growing up in school and they'd say that, it's because it evaporates and then it rains, that's what purifies water. Yeah, anything that evaporates, I guess, purifies it, but plants more so. And I often wonder if there's a difference, right? Anyone that's ever been to Canada says that the water that they drink straight from certain sources tastes the best. The best that they've ever tasted. is that because there's a level of... If nature is good at giving you nutrition, and usually they'll say, oh, if you eat lots of vegetation and this, that, and the other, it's very healthy. It has nutrients and this and that. How do you know it's not putting nutrients in the sweat? It's sweat, if you like, so it's drawing out the moisture from the ground. It's sweat, but it's also given a slight tang to the... And then it collects, condensates, comes together, drops rain, and then you're scooping it from the river. And then what if that's going on to feed... gives you a healthier river, let's say.
There's many forests there. Yeah.
So there's a natural way of sweating it with the sunlight. Absolutely. I think both of these need heat. But which one purifies water better? Evaporation or plants? Evaporation. Because if you think about it, it's gone through the medium. It's filtered out all of the bits of soil and everything else, and you know, you can put a bag over a branch, tie it off, and it will fill with moisture. You capture in on that. Drinking it is very different. Not warm. It's not great warm, but yeah, cooled down. It's quite nice of an evening. Again, they probably didn't have plastic and weren't covering trees in this manner, but they might have had another way of doing something like that. But still, that just gives you an indication of there's a type of moisture that's coming from, and it's weird to me that, you know, water is on a shelf in most shops. Have you seen that? Yeah. And it's all the same shit. Yeah. One says it's Yorkshire, one says it's this, one says it's that. I often wonder if Evian and Volvic and that would ever, you know, their thing is water, right? Easy scooping it from a river. But we put a bag over a certain tree and we're extracting water from certain trees. From the bag, we then take the water and then, you know, because in science, what's the nutrition ratio of that compared to volcanic water?
Yeah, volcanic water though will have something in it.
Yeah, volcanic water will have minerals in it, but still, for a water company, you know, I just don't know how you brainstorm in a company like that. Right, we want to expand, we want to go bigger. Okay, what's the product? Water. Right. It's really only one way to, you know, but now you've got more ways. Now if you put a bag, half the tree can be natural, give the tree its life, and switch. You want to alternate. Bag over one side and collect, that hits the light during the summer, obviously the heat gets in there. Yeah. As the leaves begin to evaporate, you'll collect the moisture in the bag, condensate, drip down, you know how it is. Take this bag out, you've got a hefty bag of water in survival tactic. Now you've got it from that type of plant or tree. So if it's a birch tree, it's evaporated birch water. And then if you get that tested, what nutrition does it have? What is in that? At a more potent ratio that's usually just mixed into the environment, and then versus an oak tree. Yeah. Evaporated oak water.
Yeah, might have some minerals or something in it from the
tree.
tree.
My God, Birch, is this what you drink? I can see why you love water.
Yeah.
You know, it's a new take. I don't know whether it would have any benefits to it, but I wonder if a certain tree like birch has, I don't know, let's say it's got more magnesium in it, and oak might have more iron in the water. You know, traces. Yeah. But even still, trace amounts drunk over a long period of time.
If some sugars leak in there as well.
Yeah, sugars, the parts of the plant itself. Yeah. And then you now have Volvic, volcano water. This is what it tastes like when it's travelled through loads of rock. Yeah. Wonderful. This is it from a spring. Yeah. But now, this is it extracted from here. This is it extracted from there. And then it gives upcoming scientists new ways to sort of test. Let's say we give that a test. Oh, wow, this one's packed full of this, this, and this. This antioxidant, that antioxidant, this, that. And in it, does, over a long period of time of people drinking this, do certain diseases go away? Do you not get a cold? Does
Yeah, that might be affected by nature we are avoiding in winter especially. Yeah.
And by collecting this, is there less floods? Is there less this? Is there less that? Yeah, it gets me curious. There you are. Now you've got multiple ways to sell this type of water
Yeah.
and get more people drinking it. In a way, I guess. Yeah. And then, what does this do for brain development? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. Who knows?
I think it's one adventure that's never been cashed in
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
You never know. I might stow it away for later. I don't know. I like to find these things as more so than anything else, but there we are. So yeah, I'm going to leave that there. I think I've said enough on this one. It feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it now.